Chapter 355. I'm writing a book. No story content was provided in the original text. This way, please, Madam Norma. Yu Jinho led the guests into the living room. Adam White, Norma Selner, and Thomas Andre entered Suho's house in sequence. Thomas Andre leisurely looked around the living room and grinned. Quite a cozy house. With those words, Thomas Andre's large hand effortlessly lifted the wheelchair Norma Selner was in, gently carrying it over the threshold. Such tremendous strength, as if he were just picking up a pair of wooden chopsticks with his fingers. However, Norma Selner, seated in the wheelchair, simply looked ahead as if accustomed to such occurrences. With her deep, pearl-like eyes, she observed everyone gathered in this house. But Adam White, next to her, felt a cold sweat trickle down his spine. The individuals gathered in this place right now. Outwardly, this was clearly an ordinary family home, perfectly fitting Thomas Andre's description of cozy. However, if one truly knew each of its members, this place was no different from humanity's strongest combat fortress, where nuclear bombs, ready to detonate at any moment, were gathered. Sung Il-hwan, a presumed national-level hunter who fights with 2 daggers. His combat prowess was said to be comparable even to China's Liu Zhigong. Cha Hai-in, the undisputed national-level hunter who flies on a black dragon, bringing thunder and lightning wherever she goes, alias Empress of Lightning. Yu Jinho, creator of the game solo-leveling Ragnarok, CEO of Ajin Soft, who distributed the awakening system known as the Tower of Trials to all of humanity, alias the Upgrader. And finally, Hunter Sung Suho. Breaking the brief silence, Norma Selner politely greeted Suho in fluent Korean. I finally have the pleasure of meeting you. My name is Norma Selner. You know me? Of course I do. I was the one who cheered for your safe birth more than anyone. Norma Selner answered Suho's question, reminiscing about a distant memory. 20-odd years ago. No, much further back than that. The dizzying future she had glimpsed through her abilities. The most dangerous moment in this universe's history, and yet a miracle of a moment more radiant than any other. But time flowed, and Norma Selner, now facing the grown Suho before her, spoke gravely. If you hadn't been born safely that day, this world as we know it now would have been very, very different. Though the words of the prophet lacked context, Suho's expression hardened. Do you know, while giving birth to you, how much holy water of life do you think Cha Hai-in consumed? Perhaps if he hadn't met the shadow of the world tree, he wouldn't have understood the meaning of those words at all. I am quite a skilled prophet, you see. Norma Selner, seated in her wheelchair, calmly introduced herself to everyone surrounding her. It was a kind of consideration. There were many here who already knew her, but there were also ordinary people like Park Kyung-hye or Sung Jinwoo who didn't know her at all. Thanks to that, I could see things others couldn't, such as about you, Sung Suho, and your father. So she had sincerely prayed and cheered for Sung Jinwoo's life to be filled with happiness and for his son to be born safely. It's a little late, but I sincerely thank you. Thank you for being born safely. I really appreciate it. Norma Selner bowed politely to express her gratitude. Thank you so much for giving birth to a healthy child, Lady Cha Hai-in. Suho was left speechless at the sight of her addressing his mother with such sincerity. Gulp. Amidst this, Adam White was realizing anew just how important the individuals he was standing among were. For Norma Selner to speak of someone in such a way, and perhaps thanks to his experience connecting briefly to the Tower of Trials or directly facing those gathered here, memories of Sung Jinwoo were gradually surfacing in Adam White's mind. Suppressing his confused thoughts, he whispered to Thomas Andre in a small voice. Excuse me. Perhaps this isn't a conversation I should be a part of. Don't worry, you're qualified too. I don't know the reason, but Sung Jinwoo was quite fond of you. Was it because, you were good at translating? No, was it just because you have a good personality? Ha, what does it matter? Thomas Andre patted Adam White's shoulder with the relaxed demeanor befitting the first user of the Tower of Trials. Of course, that didn't alleviate Adam White's tension. After a brief but heavy silence, Yu Jinho, glancing around, tried to lighten the mood with a forced cough. You are born to be loved. Sorry. Ah, a failure. In the even more solemn atmosphere, Suho's gaze suddenly fell on Norma Selner's wheelchair. Did you injure your leg? No, It is merely ordinary aging. My muscles have weakened due to my age, you see. In fact, being a prophet is quite a sedentary profession. At Norma Selner's response, delivered with a light joke, Suho's gaze shifted elsewhere. There was someone else here as old as Norma Selner, Sung Il-won and Park Kyung-hae. But unlike the frail Norma Selner, those two, though showing the passage of time, were still healthy. In fact, Sung Il-won, aside from his age, was in a precarious state where his body could be torn apart by dimensional rifts at any moment due to the numerous star pieces embedded in him. Despite that, he looked incredibly healthy compared to Norma Selner. It was a relief from Suho's perspective, and he thought he knew the reason. I've gathered all the ingredients. Shall I try making it soon? Item, Holy Water of Life. Acquisition difficulty. A mysterious potion that cures all illnesses with strong magical power. Its full effect is manifested only when the entire bottle is used. The Holy Water of Life he had intended to make for Sung Il-won all this time. There were 3 ingredients required for its creation, but Suho had not merely gathered the ingredients, he had found the very source of them, enough to use them lavishly without regret. Holy Water of Life. Ingredients: purified Demon King's blood, fragment of the World Tree, spring water of the Echo Forest. Now that all the ingredients were gathered, it was time to create it. Among these ingredients, the purified Demon King's blood was Essil's blood crystal. The fragment of the World Tree was a given, since he had found the World Tree itself, and the spring water of the Echo Forest was continuously being transported from Circa's homeland even at this moment. Suho could now extract as many ingredients for the Holy Water of Life as Essil's blood permitted, as many as he could squeeze out of her blood crystals. However, from the moment he found the World Tree until now, a series of major incidents, including the recent class change quest, had erupted one after another, leaving no time to craft the Holy Water of Life. Even Sung Il-won, who actually needed to drink it, had been busy engaging in battles. Additionally, Sung Il-won himself had said he wanted to train more using the power of the star pieces, so it had been postponed until now. Grandfather. For Suho, who had become the guardian of the World Tree, monarch of transcendence, crafting the Holy Water of Life no longer even required the system's assistance. This was now the realm of his authority. Yes. When Suho suddenly turned to him, Sung Il-won immediately understood and nodded. The time had finally come. He had postponed it, using his training as an excuse. In truth, he was slowly reaching his limit. Especially while fending off the apostles of conquest recently, he had been desperately suppressing the widening cracks in his body. But the gains from pushing himself that far had also been great. Sung Il-won's vessel had grown beyond comparison to before, exceeding its limits. But pushing him any further would be truly dangerous. As Sung Il-won nodded, Suho opened his inventory without hesitation. Do you want to craft him Holy Water of Life? Craft. At that single word, the 3 ingredients stored in his inventory began to mix above Suho's hands. Crafting item, Holy Water of Life. The success rate of crafting and number of resulting items vary depending on the crafter's intelligence stat. 7, 5. There was no need to listen to the countdown. The system was emphasizing the importance of Suho's intelligence stat, but it no longer mattered. Suho already understood the principle of crafting the Holy Water of Life perfectly. Blood crystal. The power and life contained in the purified blood of demons, highly refined and compressed. The origin of that power likely stemmed from the desire and yearning of void dwellers and the dregs of the afterlife to become living beings. Fragment of the World Tree. A fragment of the great tree whose leaves alone possessed such potent life force that they were used as ingredients for healing potions. This power was a life force so strong that it could even cause departed souls to be reborn. Spring water of the Echo Forest. The lives of countless elves, nurtured by spirits for long ages. The purifying force, a convergence of hope of pure elves who survived a maddened realm that devoured bodies and souls. That powerful purifying force cleansed the potent toxicity ingrained in the Demon King's blood, merging the differing energies of the World Tree fragment and the Demon King's blood into one. Then, flash! Crafting successful. Obtained item, Holy Water of Life by 10. Before he knew it, the holy water of life sloshed in Suho's hand, a full 10 of them, and even then, plenty of the base ingredients still remained. Suho handed one of the bottles to Sung Il-hwan. He placed another in Norma Selner's hand, a gift for the old prophet who had prayed for his father's happiness for so long. This is... While Norma Selner was flustered upon receiving the holy water of life, Sung Il-hwan accepted it without hesitation and drank it. At that moment, Fwah! A dazzling light erupted from his body, which had been covered in countless dimensional cracks, seemingly about to shatter. Simultaneously, all the spiderweb-like fissures healed. The numerous star pieces embedded in his body melted, beginning to merge into one. And within that brilliant aura of light, Sung Il-hwan snatched up the unified, purified divine power. Flash! Like blessed rain falling on a drought-stricken land riddled with cracks, the fruits of Sung Il-hwan's hardships finally materialized. Thomas Andre, watching the scene from behind with his arms crossed, raised an eyebrow slightly, as though intrigued. Having secretly hunted down numerous outer god cultists with the U.S. government, he recognized the type of power emanating from Sung Il-hwan at a glance. How could he not smile? Heh! The outer gods would be furious if they saw. For an apostle who doesn't serve them to be born. Not just a high priest level, but an apostle level. Sung Il-hwan's eyes, having absorbed all that divine power after the star pieces were purified by the holy water of life, shone mystically. Meanwhile, at that very moment, in the depths of the North Pole, an emergency bell suddenly rang in the secret base that Yuri Orlov had hidden under dozens of layers of S-rank barriers. The Prime Minister's order has come down. Execute Project Unwithering Spring. Beep, 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 beep. Amidst the blaring alarms within the base, Director Petrov swiftly issued instructions to the control room staff. Tension was palpable on his face. All devices to maximum output. Increase essence stone supply by 300%. Across from the control room, visible beyond reinforced glass, was a giant circular hall. At its center sat a circular structure of enormous size. A massive hole existed in the center of this device, called the Void Gate. Beyond that hole lay a darkness that seemed to absorb light. No, it was a gate to a star-studded universe, unfolding like an abyss. Director, mana levels have reached a dangerous point. A technician shouted. However, Petrov ignored him and continued. Then double the injection rate of the star pieces, but at this rate, the barrier. It's fine. It's the Prime Minister's order. Goo. Energy extracted from Elvenwood was being sucked into the Void Gate. The entire secret base began to vibrate as if an earthquake had struck. Watching the scene, two technicians swallowed hard as they observed the tremendous energy raging beyond the Void Gate. That is becoming something completely different from when we first built it. Right. At first, it was just a small dimensional crack. Alexei, the technician who had personally built that device, was breaking out in a cold sweat. Ever since the Prime Minister started adding more magic circles and inputting more materials, that thing started getting stranger and stranger. His colleague, Ivan, nodded uneasily. Yeah, it feels strange looking at it. It's like someone from that side is watching us too. Right. It's like a two-way passage. As much as we look at it, they're looking back at us from that side. Beep, 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 beep. The ominous warning sound repeated faster and faster. Simultaneously, the void gate in the center of the circular hall grew brighter. What was initially a pale gray gradually turned into a blinding white. Like gazing directly at the sun, an intense flash filled the hall. Petrov, sweating profusely, observed this entire situation coolly. He didn't know exactly what Prime Minister Orlov was planning. No one knew. All they knew was that this void gate was no simple passage. Fa! Sung Il-hwan fully assimilated the mystical light flowing from his body. Phew! Though a deep breath finally escaped Sung Il-hwan's previously tightly shut lips, a profound silence filled the living room. Everyone held their breath, marveling and astonished at his transformation. Just moments ago, Sung Il-hwan's entire body was covered in dimensional cracks, looking as if it would shatter at any moment. But now, he had become a completely different being. Even Suho's family members, who weren't awakened, could feel it. The aura emanating from Sung Il-hwan had changed. Darling, Sung Il-hwan turned his head to see his wife, Park Kyung-hye, approaching with a worried expression. A gentle divine power swirled within his eyes. "Are you okay?" At his wife's concern, Sung Jinwoo smiled softly and nodded. "I feel refreshed for a change, after taking the good medicine my grandson gave me." Though he spoke lightly, honestly, it was beyond his expectations, to the point where Sung Jinwoo himself was surprised. "To think my body could feel this light." Sung Jinwoo looked at his own hand, slowly clenching and unclenching his fist. Even in that simple movement, he felt a power on a different level than before. This was definitely the divine power of the outer gods, yet simultaneously, it was an independent force that did not submit to them. Like starlight, resembling the sun, but not the sun itself, entirely new. It was astonishing and wondrous, especially for Sung Jinwoo, who had always fought for his mission, having received an immense power that he found difficult to handle. That divine power, which always felt so unsettling, has perfectly harmonized within me. To think such a thing is possible. There is no need for such surprise. For the holy water of life, that much is fundamental. Its efficacy was already proven when Lady Heian gave birth to the young master. As if waiting, Beru abruptly popped his head out, stroking his chin as he recalled that time. In fact, it was far more critical back then. It was as if she harbored the dawn of a new universe within a human body. The dawn of a new universe. At that most fitting expression, Chahayan found herself nodding unconsciously. Suddenly recalling the labor pains from when she was pregnant with Suho, her stomach needlessly ached. It wasn't a joke or a metaphor. At that time, it truly felt as if a big bang was occurring inside her womb. What had alleviated that pain was the holy water of life her husband had given her. But one bottle wasn't enough, and she had to drink more on several occasions. I too feel as if I've been newly born. It wasn't a metaphor. He sincerely felt as if some divine being had just newly created him, a vitality welling up from within his body, and simultaneously, a strange yet refreshing feeling, as if he had to learn to walk all over again. I'll need training to get used to this. Motivation surged. Various ideas on how to use this unfamiliar yet natural power were budding in his mind. Realizing this, Sung Jinwoo let out a soft chuckle. How absurd, all this motivation at my age. Wasn't this like a child restless with excitement over a new toy? But as it happened, there was another white-haired old man in this very room who had recently become just such a child. Thomas Andre, the king of giants, now the monarch of conquest, was leaning against the wall, his muscular arms crossed, and upon hearing Sung Jinwoo's words, he grinned and retorted, "Hehe, I know that feeling. Congratulations on becoming the godless apostle." The godless apostle? Since you've reached the apostle level, serving no god, wouldn't a name like that suit you? Korean is a bit difficult. The godless apostle. Wasn't it quite a fitting name? It showed that Thomas Andre had learned Korean really well. Apostle level, you say? At those words, Adam White, standing beside them, was startled and looked back and forth between the two. Though their nationalities and races were different, these old men had now become humans possessing monarch-level and apostle-level power respectively. Unlike common awakened, these two had truly, vastly transcended humanity. At Adam White's bewildered words, Thomas nodded and said, "Yes, but he's different from ordinary apostles. Unlike the outer god cultists we've dealt with so far, he purified the outer god's power and made it his own." Is such a thing possible? The chance of being enthralled by an outer god again later on? None. That I guarantee. Beru dismissed the slightest possibility. The main ingredient of the holy water of life is a fragment of the world tree. And that world tree is a purification device created by the Itarim of this universe, who is now dead and gone. Since it has already been purified by the power of that world tree, the master of the power has, in effect, changed. There is no possibility of being enthralled by other Itarim. In the first place, they invaded because they wanted to steal the mana of our universe in this manner. Hearing Beru's explanation, Sung Jinwoo let out a sigh of relief, even the last vestiges of anxiety vanishing. He looked proudly at Suho and said, "Thank you, Suho. Because of you, it seems I can continue to help you all in the future. Still, don't overdo it. If you do, Dad will scold me when he gets back." Ho ho. Sung Jinwoo burst into a hearty laugh at Suho's playful exaggeration. It was then, Norma Selner, who had been sitting quietly in the back, slowly rose from her wheelchair. At that sight, Thomas Andre's eyes widened. While his attention was captivated by Sung Jinwoo's transformation, Norma Selner had also drunk the holy water of life. Suho had given her. And its effect was instantaneous. Her stooped back straightened, and her trembling hands steadied. Strength returned to her legs, which had been unable to stand due to weakened muscles. It had breathed vitality into Norma Selner's old and frail constitution, who was considerably older than Sung Jinwoo. As if water had been given to a withered flower pot, vitality returned even to her age-spotted skin. The holy water of life was fundamentally the power of the world tree. It couldn't reverse aging against the flow of souls, but it was sufficient to breathe vitality into an aged body. Yu Jinho exclaimed in admiration, "Madam Norma, you look so much better. It's been a long time since I felt like this." Norma Selner, who had been speechless for a long while, feeling as if she had become at least 10 years younger, finally managed to speak. And one step, then another, she carefully walked to stand before Suho on her own feet, for the first time in a very long while, and she bowed her head deeply with heartfelt sincerity. "Thank you so much, Sung Suho. This gift, I don't know how to express my gratitude." Norma Selner hadn't come looking for Suho today expecting something like this. No matter how great a prophet, one cannot foretell all futures. Amidst the great currents threatening the world, the future of her own frail body was of little consequence. Yet, unexpectedly, she had received such a precious gift. At the profound respect shown by an elder considerably older than himself, Suho answered humbly, "It's all right. I merely did what was natural." Suho already knew that Madame Norma Selner had a long-standing connection with his father. So, if his father returned to Earth and she had already passed away due to old age, wouldn't his father feel regret? Perhaps my father would have done the same if he were here. Ahem. Thomas Andre, watching their conversation, suddenly turned his head and cleared his throat. At his reaction, Laura, Thomas's longtime secretary who was beside him, suddenly looked up at his face. Strange. Thomas Andre, who had been grinning broadly just moments ago, was now glaring with his eyes wide, wearing an extremely fierce expression. Laura asked, "Thomas, are you, by any chance, crying?" "Humph, of course not." Thomas gritted his teeth with an even scarier expression, to the point where even his ears turned red. Laura nodded indifferently. "Well, it can happen. As one gets older, female hormones increase." I said no. Madame Norma Selner is Thomas's one and only friend, after all. What? Only one? Then what about Laura? Let's keep our professional and private lives separate, master. At those words, Thomas truly almost cried. Norma Selner smiled gently, watching Thomas. The unchanging appearance of her old friend felt heartwarming. Then she turned her head again, looked intently into Suho's eyes, and spoke politely. "Sung Suho, would you mind if I held your hand for a moment?" "My hand? Well, I don't mind, but why?" Suho extended his hand with a puzzled expression. Norma Selner's gaunt, dry hands carefully clasped his. Norma Selner closed her eyes and said, "Though it's all an old story now, I once did this before your father as well." Upgrader. Now Yu Jinho, the CEO of the game company that was turning all of humanity into awakened individuals, was called by such a nickname. But there was a time when Norma Selner was the one and only upgrader in the entire world. The ability to draw out the potential of hunters, enhancing the abilities of those who normally couldn't grow. However, unlike Yu Jinho, Norma Selner's ability at that time only applied to those who were already awakened. Back then, I dared to step forward, saying I would enhance Sung Jinwoo's abilities. Hey. Looking back, it was a truly audacious situation. Norma Selner chuckled softly. And how surprised she had been. Her own dark history of almost fainting upon encountering the endless darkness emanating from Sung Jinwoo. But though the situation was similar to then, the current Norma Selner had no intention of stepping forward to enhance Suho's potential as she had with Sung Jinwoo. Quite the opposite. I had retired once, but after the cataclysm, I awakened to the ability to see things others couldn't, just like before, and recently, my ability has detected an ominous gaze. A gaze, you say? Yes, that gaze, which I feel even at this moment. I came here in person because I wanted to enable Suho to see it as well. Would you close your eyes and accept the energy I will share with you? Yes, I will. Though he didn't quite understand what she meant, Suho obediently closed his eyes. At that moment, Norma Selner opened her eyes again. Flash! Norma Selner's wide-open pupils had turned completely white. Simultaneously, Suho's vision, though his eyes were closed, expanded in an instant. In that darkness, centered on Suho, the living room walls disappeared, the house disappeared, the city disappeared. The boundary extended beyond national borders, beyond Earth, past the outer universe, leaping an unimaginably vast distance in a single moment. And there, an eye? What Suho encountered was a giant eye, an eye of unimaginable size, cold yet filled with curiosity. It was looking down upon the entirety of Earth, like the eye of a scientist observing cells through a microscope. Suho instinctively realized that this was Itarim, and that this giant entity was intently observing Earth even at this moment. And that gaze, it saw Suho. It wasn't just a feeling. That immense gaze, its emotions unreadable, had precisely found Suho, and it smiled widely, as if in greeting. The white abyss, the abyss shall see thee. At that moment, Norma Selner's voice reached Suho's ears. The voice was different from usual, a prophetic voice carrying a strange resonance. At that instant, zap! As if a spark had flown, the two simultaneously released their hands, and Suho's consciousness was instantly flung back from the outer universe to reality. Ha! With that, the giant gaze that had been watching Suho vanished as if it were never there. But the after effect lingered for a long time. That thing just now. Suho looked at his palm, carefully choosing his words. He had many doubts, but among the questions filling his mind, the most pressing one, where is it now? Suho gritted his teeth. His eyes had transformed into those of a hunter tracking prey. At his question, Norma Selner's completely whitened pupils slowly turned north, and she murmured, breaking out in a cold sweat with an expression full of confusion. Ah, it's already this far. It's already begun. At that single phrase, everyone in the living room tensed. Madam, what do you mean by that? What has begun? Adam White, unable to bear it any longer, asked urgently. Norma Selner answered as if screaming. The North Pole. We must stop them immediately. That eye is already this far. Quickly, quickly. Thump. Thomas Andre's giant palm caught Norma Selner's back as she finally fainted on the spot. And Thomas Andre turned his gaze to meet Suho's eyes. What did you see? Itarim. Suho answered, his entire body blazing with fighting spirit. That thing was not an apostle. After Norma Selner, who had fainted, was laid on a bed, and the slight commotion settled, Adam White, with a grave expression, took out the reason for his visit, a black briefcase secured by national security locks. This was originally the material he had brought to show Madame Norma Selner and seek her counsel, but to think he would end up taking it out here in Korea, on the other side of the globe, after unexpectedly passing through a gate. I'm completely disoriented, but in times like these I must keep my wits about me. I am the director, after all. Adam White, reaffirming his duty and responsibility, calmly opened the briefcase's security locks. Click, clack. The order of things has changed somewhat, but my original purpose in visiting Madame Norma Selner was also because of the North Pole. However, it seems the situation is getting far more serious than we predicted. Adam White's expression had been consistently grim, a situation where not an apostle, but an outer god itself might directly intervene. Hadn't this already far surpassed the realm of what ordinary humans could resolve? Just like back then. It will be faster if you see this data directly. Adam White, with a serious face, took out a work tablet from the briefcase, and he didn't forget to add a word of caution as he looked around at those gathered. Please be aware that all the materials you are about to see are top secret. Whoosh. As he launched a program on the tablet, a translucent hologram spread above the screen, filling the living room with a giant world map. Our bureau also collects and analyzes all data shared by the World Hunter Association, including that from the United States. All that big data is contained within this, the disaster management system. Suho's family members looked up, surveying the massive world map. As Adam White described, the holographic map was intricately categorized with colored dots and zones of various sizes. Though it appeared dazzling at first glance, this world map was in itself a horrific record of disasters and calamities. As of this moment, all gates and dungeons that have appeared and disappeared worldwide, field-type dungeons, and even more severely, major and minor areas that have become apocalyptic and abandoned. Besides those, the accumulated big data of countless disasters and calamities across the globe. Our Bureau has poured our heart and soul into completing this single map. The purpose, naturally, is to prevent the world's destruction. Adam White's formal briefing began. And this is the current situation at the North Pole. Click. Climate was added to the world map. Clouds? Someone spoke up. In a surprising turn of events, as the climate setting was added, large white clouds centered around the North Pole were gathering into a massive spiral. They were moving very slowly, and the scale so immense it couldn't be captured by human sight, making it imperceptible to the naked eye. But looking at the world map as a whole like this, it was visible at a glance. Abnormal climate. Both its scale and nature were by no means ordinary. Originally, abnormal climate is a phenomenon that occasionally occurs in areas eroded by the blue mist leaking from gates. However, this is a little different, Adam White said. This vortex is an abnormal climate phenomenon never before seen in any of the gates or dungeon breaks we have collected data on. While the possibility that the Hunter Management Bureau had missed some data couldn't be entirely ruled out, it was certainly a rare phenomenon. However, what's also strange is that despite this, no flow of mana is being detected from that vortex. Suho asked, if there's no flow of mana, does that mean those are just clouds simply moving? Yes. Just like clouds moving purely due to wind, it seems to be a secondary phenomenon caused by some other event. This also doesn't make sense. Usually, situations inexplicable by science were attributed to mana. But if there wasn't even a flow of mana, what on earth was happening at the center of that vortex? For now, looking only at the phenomenon itself, we predict that a dimensional hole has opened at the center of that vortex. A dimensional hole. It meant a gate had appeared. However, it absolutely won't be an ordinary gate. Firstly, a gate without a mana wavelength cannot exist. Therefore, we believe there's a very high probability that Prime Minister Orlov of Russia has surrounded it with multiple layers of powerful barriers, thoroughly concealing the gate's existence from external detection. The location of the North Pole happened to be within Russia's borders, and Prime Minister Yuri Orlov, an S-rank barrier specialist, was a man who had become a dictator by creating his own fishbowl, protecting Russia's major cities with barriers. Taking this information into account, it was a highly plausible deduction. But everything is just speculation. Currently, we cannot be certain of anything. We would like to dispatch an investigation team to obtain more detailed information, but sending a hunter capable of investigating that mysterious abnormal climate would be perceived by Russia as an act tantamount to the United States launching a nuclear weapon. This was because, of all countries, the United States had been the one to pressure Russia the most about its continued neglect of the Elven Woods. That's why I came to Madame Norma Selner out of frustration, since we can't go directly to at least hear her counsel through a prophecy. But now, having directly heard Norma Selner's ominous prophecy, his heart felt even heavier. It was certain that something tremendous had happened at the North Pole, but they couldn't go see for themselves. Then we can just sneak in. Suho, having heard all of Adam White's briefing, finally spoke. A simple, clear conclusion. But Adam White was negative. That, too, is not as easy as it sounds. Breaching an S-rank barrier is difficult, but the moment you step inside that barrier, Prime Minister Orlov will know immediately. Yuri Orlov was no mere S-rank hunter. He was a man capable of deploying barriers exceeding S-rank by using the external mana contained in numerous essence stones mined from dungeons as fuel. His simple combat power might be S-rank, but his barrier ability alone was considered national level. It's absolutely impossible to sneak into a place surrounded by multiple layers of such barriers without him knowing. An existence powerful enough to breach those barriers would be even easier to detect, and an existence weak enough for Prime Minister Orlov to ignore upon discovering the intrusion wouldn't be able to breach the barriers in the first place. Even as he explained this, Adam White felt frustrated, a situation where nothing seemed to work, and, like with the Elvenwood issue, simply pressuring Russia politically from the standpoint of the World Hunter Association was also difficult. For now, it was just clouds moving. No mana was actually being detected from the outside. With no concrete evidence that anything was happening there was no way to arbitrarily pick a fight and no way to pressure Russia. And what he said was a fact Suho already knew. He had already spread his shadow soldiers across the world long ago. Since it was unknown when or where the apostles might appear, he had completed preparations to enable spatial movement to any place in the world through shadow exchange, should he choose. However, Russia alone was impossible. As Adam White said, even shadow soldiers risked being detected by Orlov if they tried to cross Russia's barrier. If there were at least people entering that barrier, he could have hidden them in their shadows and entered. But since Russia was such a closed-off country, and there were no recent travelers to and from there, even that was difficult. So the shadow soldiers Suho had deployed were merely waiting near the barrier. This, conversely, meant that Suho could instantly teleport himself to the front of Russia's barrier at any time. Or anyone, not just himself. In that sense, an interesting thought came to mind. Sneaking in undetected is impossible. Then let's try entering openly this time. Pardon? What do you mean by that? As Adam White made a puzzled expression, Suho suddenly turned his head and looked at Thomas Andre beside him. Why are you suddenly looking at me? At that peculiar gaze, Thomas Andre, who had been standing with his arms crossed nonchalantly, twitched an eyebrow. Suho looked at his massive forearms and curled his lips upwards. Let me rephrase. The point is that someone specific just needs to avoid being detected, right? What? If the other side was untouchable due to lack of evidence, then conversely, didn't it mean this side just needed to ensure there was no evidence either? Suho smiled meaningfully, exchanging glances with Thomas Andre. Since it's for world peace anyway, let's be a little shameless. Grin. Did you know? Since time immemorial, masks have always been essential for those who protect the peace of Earth. Huh? At that audacious expression, Thomas Andre eventually burst into a hollow laugh. And the next moment, flash, a smile even more mischievous than Suho's appeared on his lips. Thomas Andre. Who was he? Now he was called by grand nicknames like Goliath or Monarch of Conquest, but long, long ago, when he was much younger, a youth brimming with vigor during his days as the UFC undisputed heavyweight champion, his first nickname, no matter what anyone said, was UFC's Bad Boy. That sounds fun. Let's do it right away. Indeed, such crazy antics were one of the things that excited Thomas Andre the most. Moscow. Prime Minister Yuri Orlov immediately left the Kremlin and departed for the Arctic base. Now that Project Unwithering Spring was fully operational, waiting idly in the palace was an unbearable itch. Waha! How long have I waited for this moment? He burst into mad laughter and ran towards the North Pole at full speed. Wasn't power already overflowing from his body? The unwithering spring. There was no need to wait. He had to go directly and face that power. Prime Minister? The Prime Minister is going out. The soldiers on guard duty at Moscow's barrier couldn't help but be bewildered at the sight. They had never once seen the dictator of Russia leave the fishbowl alone like that. Given his usual personality, he would have taken helicopters or planes, accompanied by strikingly beautiful secretaries and entourages, wherever he went. The reason, as everyone in Russia knew, was to flaunt his status to the world. But in reality, no mode of transportation could be faster than an S-rank hunter at full sprint. So they were even more surprised. The dictator's retreating figure, running off on his own 2 feet like that, without even caring for his usual vanity or appearances. Moreover, a mystical radiance enveloped his entire body as he sped away. It was a beautiful light, captivating enough to enthrall anyone who looked at it. Momentarily mesmerized by that sacred radiance, the soldiers belatedly snapped back to their senses and looked at each other confused, whispering, "What on earth is happening? Where is he going in such a hurry? It's not like something bad happened in another city, right? No, I don't think so, seeing him smile like that. But what on earth is that light? Let's report it first." However, when they reported this fact to their superiors were equally clueless about the situation. Wait for now. If the Prime Minister looked happy, it probably isn't anything bad. Yes, understood. Even the voice of the officer coming through the radio felt tinged with confusion, a situation no one understood. But what could they do? Regardless of what the dictator ruling them thought or did, nothing would change even if they knew. It's a bit unsettling, but he said to wait for now. Yes, I was surprised to see the Prime Minister smile like that for the first time, but anyway, it probably isn't anything bad. Boom, something bad happened right there, and then, the capital of Russia, Moscow, the most splendid city-state among the fishbowls created by Prime Minister Yuri Orlov. Its size was enormous, roughly 4 times that of Seoul, but before the powerful barrier meticulously created by Prime Minister Orlov, which surrounded this vast city entirely, a giant shadow was cast. What? What is that? Emergency! A giant has appeared! That's insane. What is that? Just then, a colossal giant appeared before Moscow's barrier. And not just any giant, but one entirely covered in sturdy, full-body armor. Spiritualization. This was the advent of the King of Giants, monarch of conquest. Where did such a creature suddenly? The soldiers guarding the outpost screamed. If such a massive entity existed, it should have been visible approaching from afar long ago. But this giant had suddenly appeared before the city as if it had fallen from the sky. But in reality, it wasn't from the sky, but from the ground. Using a shadow soldier already waiting in front of the barrier, a shadow gate had been opened, and he had revealed himself. Kuah! Thus, before the sturdy barrier meticulously created by Prime Minister Orlov, Thomas Andrei, revealing his full power, burst into mad laughter. That laughter shook the skies of Moscow. And the King of Giants, his face concealed by a helm, raised a giant palm and mercilessly struck down upon the barrier covering the sky. With that single blow, the entire barrier rippled, accompanied by an enormous roar. Then, one more blow. Crack! The barrier shattered. At that moment, the immense shockwave finally reached Yuri Orlov, who was rushing towards the Arctic base far away. Finally stopping his steps, Orlov turned around with a hardened expression, and discovering the figure of the colossal King of Giants in the distance, he couldn't help but be genuinely bewildered. What is that? Suddenly, his stomach churned. From the deepest recesses of his instinct, an unidentifiable foreboding assailed him, but he deliberately ignored it. Grit! How dare a mere magical beast invade my kingdom? He gritted his teeth with a terrifying expression and let out a cry. Finally, he turned his steps away from the Arctic base and ran towards Moscow, where the giant had appeared. Radiating a dazzling brilliance, this energy was none other than the divine power of an outer god, flowing from the outer universe. He was no longer an ordinary S-rank hunter. But why? As he ran towards the giant at full speed, his 2 fists were trembling minutely.